you go.
That's it, Randy. You're a jack of all trades. Thank
How many
you.
times are you going to say that?
Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming. I'd like to call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Or I'd like a motion to approve the agenda for October 11th, 2023 as presented. Pushkar, Ponder. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. We will be having patron comments tonight for this special meeting. While patron comments are not typically a feature of special board meetings, the board has designated 30 minutes at the beginning of this meeting for patrons to speak on the two topics at hand. Only patron comments pertaining to Prop S and FERPA will be permitted. Patrons wishing to address other topics may do so at the next regularly scheduled board meeting on October 26th. I'd like to welcome up first Gerald French Sr.
Good evening to everybody. Good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
I just wanted to come and say thank you for not only for the job that you're doing, for the program that you put together, the citizens in our schools, which I was gratefully selected to be a part of. And we went on our first field trip on last week, and it was a beautiful experience to learn the district, to learn not everything. We did visit all the schools, and it was just a beautiful experience. But one of the things that I was really taken aback with was one of the schools, which is Henderson. It's amazing what the staff is doing over there with so little space. And I just want to go on record to say that, and to find out if that school is on the list to be renovated, expansion, or even a new school, because literally they're working out of closets over there. And I'm pretty sure you all know that, but it's just, I just want you to know that now we know, at least I know, I can speak for me, and it wasn't a pretty sight, but it was a fulfilling sight to see that the teachers and the staff over there are working with what they have. And there was no complaining, but I know that we as a district can do better and provide better for not only the staff, but for our students. But I want to take off my hat to you all and let you all know that I appreciate everything that you're doing for my child. And I appreciate you all so much. God bless you.
Next we have Nancy Zollner.
All right. I'd like to address the board this evening regarding the Proposition S funds and the proposed plans for school improvements. I stand before you tonight as a fervent volunteer of the district, as a parent to 3 elementary-age children, and much like my cohort member before me, I'm also a member of the inaugural Citizens in Our Schools cohort. As Gerald mentioned earlier this month, we were taken on what was a whirlwind tour to experience our district and its vibrant school spirit firsthand. It was incredibly informative, and we learned a lot about the history of this great district and the spirit of the individuals, schools, staff, and students within it. We have so much to be proud of and much to look ahead to. However, we also have much work to do when it comes to ensuring that all of our students are welcomed into safe, functional, and vibrant school buildings. Tonight, as you prepare to make decisions regarding the allocation of a portion of the remaining Prop S funds to improve the facilities and operations of some of the schools and spaces in our district, I think it's vital to highlight the importance of such a task. The physical environment of schools directly affects student learning and subsequently student achievement. In order to maintain the high level of academic achievement and student success that we pride ourselves on as a district, and to continue to reach new heights, it's important that we invest in our school facilities, plan for the future, and allocate funds strategically, equitably, and efficiently. The 2 school sites being brought before you tonight for project funding are no exception. You've seen the photos, And as Gerald described, you've even heard firsthand evidence of how our district children and staff are operating within these walls. And you have the opportunity tonight to enact positive change through your vote that will ripple throughout not only these school buildings, but their communities and the district at large. I have hope that the efforts of the district administrators to bring you these project proposals, as well as your energies with reviewing and voting tonight on such, are done with the highest regard to the district and to its students. We have an obligation to ensure that all of our students are able to learn, play, and grow in functional school buildings that serve them well. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Joels, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have any other signups for today? Thank you very much. FHEA? Any comments from FHEA? FISPA? Next, we have a discussion around Prop S, and I will turn over to Wade Welch from Honer to do a presentation.
Okay.
Unless, Ken, you have a few comments to introduce it.
If that's all right, President Bertrand. Just to remind everyone that last month during the bond program update, we shared draft designs from Honer Associates for recommendations at Henderson and Fairmont and associated cost estimates with those based on those initial drawings. As part of our updated large-scale project process that we shared last March, when the initial design development for a project is complete, we said that we would bring our architect in to make a presentation to the board showing design intent, the soft costs, architectural engineering costs, and a preliminary opinion of probable construction costs and possible schedule and phasing for the projects. And so tonight we do have Wade Welch here with us from Honer Associates, who has been doing this work. Ms. Embry mentioned last month as part of the presentation that in our phased approach, we showed initial design, then schematic and design development. Because of some of the initial drawings that were done on these projects, we're kind of in a space a little bit into the schematic design, but we were at a point of pausing to come in and allow Wade to do this presentation for you. One thing I want to point out, because we shared an estimate of probable costs last month, and he'll talk a little bit more about it tonight, but we need to continue to remind our public that these are only estimates. And as the district provides more input on the drawings, there are many factors that will contribute to those costs possibly changing, and that's one of the reasons we're coming back to the board on multiple occasions, is to provide you updates on those probable costs based on the current drawings, which are also based on current work being done in the region, price per square foot for similar projects. So just to remind everyone, those could change. Also want to welcome, we have Mr. Stutzer with us at the table tonight as we have this discussion. He's working closely with Ms. Embry, our architect, on this process. Turn things over to Wade.
First thing first, thank you for having us here. Myself, Mark Ruther's out of town this week, so he was unable to be here, but he sends his regards. We do appreciate being able to come in front of the board and present information, answer questions, hear the comments from the patrons about the buildings.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Not used to the microphones. I'm used to just being loud. Thank you on behalf of Honer Associates for us having us here. We do look forward to helping the school district continue to move through Prop S projects and moving forward. So that being said, I'm going to jump right in. Things we're going to talk about today are both Henderson and Fairmont. The list is very similar, if not the same, as far as what we're going to talk about. That's an existing facilities analysis, which we have received information or input from both the building principals in regards to that. Talked with Mr. Stutzer and gone through several pieces. Schematic design, floor and site plans, cost estimates, and preliminary project schedules. As Ken said, estimates are estimates. I've done the best I can based on recent history as far as putting numbers together, but we won't truly know the cost until we bid it. But that being said, we're going to try and keep an eye on costs periodically, every month, every 2 months. As we develop the construction documents, we'll be keeping the school district up to date on any significant impacts one way or the other on our cost estimates. We'll get into the plans that we've put together so far, but I kind of wanted to emphasize these pieces aren't final. We still will meet with the district administration, technology, maintenance and facilities, the principals, the board. So just because you see plans in a certain configuration here doesn't mean it's going to be 100% final. We welcome input and recommendations and questions all along the process. So even tonight, if I get rambling, please stop me, ask a question. I do not mind answering. The more input we can gather, the better finished product that we can present to the school district.
President Bertrand, I also should have acknowledged Dr. Borman, our principal at Henderson, and Dr. Oliver, the principal at Fairmont. They're both here in the audience tonight as well. So as we move through the discussion and questions, they're here to chime in if needed as well.
I will start with Henderson for no other reason than that's the next project number on our list. So just to set everybody on the floor plan, this is the current Henderson building. It's about 74,000 square feet. As you can see, the main entrance, and then directly to the bottom left, which is the southeast, is the road that leads to the Francis Howell North campus. So that is right about there, and the front parking lot. So what we've tried to do, or what we've talked with Dr. Borman about, is one of the primary focuses is the existing multipurpose room. The original cafeteria isn't used for a cafeteria right now. She gave me a little bit of the history on this. They decided to shift to the multipurpose room that's on the side of the building as their primary cafeteria during COVID. And because of their class sizes, namely they've got 2 different PE classes, so they used the larger space with a curtain in the middle for PE, and they have their students walk down to the current multipurpose room, which is on the right side where it says gym and cafeteria. They use that for their cafeteria right now, and it's about 500 foot away from the kitchen. The kids come and get their food, they take it down to the cafeteria, they use disposable trays and utensils, and then they throw them away and return to their classes. So one of the things that we wanted to do is generate new learning space so that they can return the cafeteria to being a cafeteria. Right now, also, one of the issues they've got a music classroom that is located directly or basically within the library area. So you've got an overlap of sound issues between the library and the small music room that is in the corner of that space right there. So that is another thing that was brought to our attention as a key. And then in the center of the building, if you're familiar with Henderson, the center of the building changes levels significantly and has 2 art rooms and a music classroom built into the middle of the building. The music classroom is on the original stage, and then the 2 art rooms that you see are basically built-in original corridor areas. They do not have water. They do not have dedicated storage space. In fact, the storage, this photo right here, indicates all their storage area, which is out in the hallway, free for anybody to grab. Now, I know they monitor that and keep an eye on kids so it doesn't happen, but it's still there. In addition, each of these classrooms, both art classrooms are about 650 square foot. The music space on the stage is about 720 square foot. Typically for an elementary school, we would put these at about 900 square foot minimum for proper usage. So again, these are some of the things that we've noted both in reviewing with principal and walking the building, and we wanted to bring to your attention. This next plan, and it doesn't show up greatly, but basically there are 10 different spaces. I went back to the original construction documents for the building. there are 10 current spaces that are shown as storage or service areas from the original drawings that are now being used for special education, offices, reading specialists, quiet room, lactation room, teacher workroom, kiln room. And these photos are just some of the samples of these. The top right photo is a speech room, which you can see you barely have enough room to put a table, teacher's chair, and a handful of student chairs. The top left pictures are the kiln room, where you can barely walk into it. The walls are not rated as a kiln room should be. I do not know what the status is of the exhaust system, and it's not directly adjacent to the art classroom. So, and then finally, the bottom left photo is the lactation room. It's basically a little triangular storage room that is not ADA accessible. It does not have a recommended sink or space for a refrigerator. So it doesn't really meet the needs or meet the ADA accessibility requirements for this piece, which the school district sets forth that every building should have. So, where do we go from here? First things first, we're going to do the security vestibules. We intend to do the security vestibules. We're in the process of putting together those construction documents so that we can finish out the remainder of the security vestibules for the school district. Just as a piece of history, many of you may know this, but at the time we did the initial security vestibule package, Henderson and Fairmont, we didn't know what the scopes were going to be in those two buildings at the beginning of the Prop S work. So the administration that was in place said, okay, we're going to pause on those and address those as we develop the scope at those buildings. Well, then the pandemic hit, and then everything kind of went on pause. Well, we're now getting back to that. So and that occurs at both here and at Fairmont. New construction, what we're proposing is a classroom wing that'll have 5 standard classrooms, 2 sped rooms, a reading specialist, and student toilets. As you can see, I've got a couple of future classrooms that could be added at some point as well. We are going to fill in a small classroom or a small infill area that will become a speech room. And then we're proposing a gymnasium storm shelter on the corner of the building that will provide that extra space for PE, for vacation station, and clear other areas so that they can be used for their intended uses. The primary thing on the primary renovation areas then become taking the current multipurpose room, dividing it into 2 music classrooms, taking 3 standard classrooms, and creating 2 full-size art classrooms with the necessary storage rooms, and then also creating a core area, taking the core area where those problem areas of art and music were, and reworking those so that you have a core area for counselors, for your BSS and ESC offices, reading specialists, special ed classrooms. All of that could then be grouped into the center of the building and take a better advantage of those areas. Once you've done those primary renovations, there are secondary items that then present themselves to solve other problems. ELL, which has 4 different instructors in it, would have a full-size classroom rather than a small space, which is approximately half a classroom. They would have a dedicated room. We would recommend expanding the nurse's office, adding an ADA toilet, put a lactation room in that area, and also provide an ADA toilet for the low incidence special ed room in that area. In addition, we would look at renovating the existing faculty toilets into ADA toilets and providing that for the staff. And then the teacher workroom would actually move basically one space over from this oddly shaped triangular space and move into a full-size classroom. And all this is available because we've picked up the classrooms in the classroom wing, basically created a separate 5th grade wing, reallocated the other classrooms, which you can see in red, and created some open spaces to allow this teacher's workroom, the art classrooms, the LL room, giving those spaces proper instructional space for the students and staff that will go in those. Then all of that renovation then results in using the cafeteria as a cafeteria again. They'll be able to use that space for cafeteria, for serving, for eating. We would recommend some possible food service equipment upgrades to improve some efficiency. Do I know what those are? No, I don't. But it's a discussion that can be had as we get further into design. Then in the library portion of the building, the former music classroom can be then converted back into a tech lab / teaching space, and eliminate those primary concerns. So I hope through my speaking you can kind of see where we've gone from primary concerns to secondary concerns to resolving those secondary concerns, which then allow us to resolve the primary concerns related to the cafeteria, the art and music spaces really needing better functionality. All in all, what we proposed would add about 18,450 square feet plus or minus of new construction, and give or take 17,000 square foot of renovation work. Coupled with the renovation work, the HVAC systems for the existing building would be upgraded. There may be subsequent scope that goes with that, such as ceilings, lighting, audio-visual, fire alarm. I'm not saying it would, I'm not saying it wouldn't. Those are pieces that we would have to analyze in conjunction with Saloon, Rich Wilson, and others to see, okay, we're going to be in here and creating a big mess. What else can or should we address at the same time? So a quick summary, and I'm not going to go through each of these pieces, but I'll highlight a few of them. Namely, some of these spaces where we're going from very small spaces to what I would consider normal size spaces, such as special education, where we're going, 3 spaces that are less than 200 square foot each to 5 at 400 square foot each. We're taking reading specialists and getting them out of these tiny little spaces and giving them basically a full-size office each so that they can have their small group study. Speech, one of their rooms is the photo that I showed earlier. Very, very small space, getting it into a normal size space. Taking the art and music from the central area where they've kind of been crammed in and giving them their dedicated spaces. So this is just a summary of the different renovation work that we would provide. And something that you'll note, standard classrooms, we actually stay the same, but the instructional support spaces, the art, the music, the special education, the reading, the speech, all those get out of the closets, get out of the cubby holes, and get their own dedicated spaces, which they deserve. Site design, well, I'll pause real quick. Does anybody have questions on the floor plan aspect of Henderson?
I was just looking at the storm shelter gymnasium.
Yes.
Wouldn't a storm shelter normally be centered in the middle of the building?
Does not require to be. You need to be within 5 minutes walking distance, and that depends. FEMA has their definition of it, but on a campus this size, it's not an issue to put it at one end of the building or other. Even at Fairmont, which we'll visit later, that does not have to be centralized as well. It's not uncommon to see these at one end or the other of the building.
The other thing, I actually went through Henderson the other day, and a comment was made that it's dark, and it is. Due to the fact that, you know, some of the additions to the building have closed in some, I guess, some open air or you know, sunlight being able to creep in. Can any, I guess I should ask my fellow board members, if anything can be done to maybe brighten up the building at all?
I've not
Besides
walked-
just artificial lighting?
I've not walked each space. I'll get back to that.
Okay.
You know, if the lighting there is all LED, I don't believe it is.
It is not, and there's certainly an opportunity as we work through part of this process, either the rest of part of this or at some point in time, depending on funding come back, and we retrofit LED lighting throughout the building.
And then coming back to your comment about natural lighting, I don't recall if there were skylights originally in that building. Different school districts handle skylights in different ways. In fact, one of our clients told me if I ever put in a skylight, he'd fire me on the spot. But we don't mind investigating that. We did have them at Francis Howell North at one point, but we took them out as part of the value engineering process. But I've done them. I love skylights. Maintenance departments don't necessarily like skylights. I don't know what Saloon's history is on that, but like I said, school districts have that, different opinions on that, and we'll go either way as far as investigating.
Your experience, Lon? With skylights?
They're
A help or a hazard?
yeah, it doesn't necessarily help. I think it creates another thing that we have to manage from an operational standpoint. Obviously, you guys understand at some point in time those seals on those systems begin to fail. And so we tend, but what you'll see historically across the country is people tend to move away from those and really move to LED lighting, which also helps us from an operational efficiency standpoint, from a cost standpoint. There's a lot of rebates out there to help us recruit some of that investment.
I had a quick question. I know there was a lot of talk with Francis Howell North on the storm shelter and how, you know, all the concrete and everything that's gone into it. Would this storm shelter be up to the same standard, or is it, since it's not a totally new build, is it a different standard? How does that work?
It would be the same standard as far as construction of it. Matter of fact, I think it would be a similar construction as the one at Francis Howell North, which would be precast panels, likely a brick or some type of veneer to blend into the existing building, but it have to meet the same ICC 500 standards. The newer codes, basically 2015 and newer, require that basically anytime you touch, as in add on to a educational facility in the tornado areas, which obviously we are one, you have to put in a storm shelter. So, and it has to meet ICC 500 standards. And I'll touch on this when we get to Fairmont, because that one presents an opportunity to do it in a different way, using masonry as opposed to precast panels. Does save some money. It's not a significant amount. It's just a different way of doing it and can move the schedule along a little differently than precast panels.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So is it possible, well, I know it's possible, but have we looked at maybe the cost of making the classroom additions back here the storm shelter instead of the new gymnasium?
We have not.
So I just worked at Kirkwood, and two different elementary schools. One made a gymnasium, the tornado shelter. One made a new addition of classrooms, the tornado shelter. So I didn't know where the cost effectiveness or...
We've kind of worked off the model of using the gym there because the classroom addition has come and gone on and off the table at times during the 3 years of discussion and further back. With it most likely being there, we can definitely investigate looking at that in that location in lieu of the precast panels.
Thank you.
I also have a question to Ms. Pushkar's point. She was mentioning how dark it is in Henderson. Is there any way that, I know that building is extremely old, is there any way are we looking at replacing the windows or replacing some? I know that our HVAC system is not very good, but I would think some of those windows probably are pretty cool in the winter anyway, with leaks and everything. Is there any way we could look and see what it would cost to replace some of those windows?
It definitely look.
I mean, I think if we're gonna be replacing the HVAC, we might as well look at what the window replacement is gonna be. I mean, those windows are at least old, probably older than me, which is sad.
No, on that building, actually, I don't think so.
Oh,
That building
shoot.
was built in the 90s. You were probably born in 89.
Oh, God, yes, that's it. Thank you.
Wade, we've had a lot of discussion around scope changes and the impact that has on the cost of these projects that we're doing. You meant, and part of our commitment to the board with bringing this back at regular intervals for updates is to discuss what those might be. You mentioned the possibility of PA system updates, fire systems, electrical. At what point would we expect having that analysis done to know whether we would be making recommendations around those projects?
By the end of the year, I would think.
It would be during this next design process?
Yes, yeah. Traditionally, if you look at our design process, you have programming, you have schematics, you have design development, you have construction documents. We're at the midpoint of schematics, where we're figuring out where pieces lay and where we go, where this goes, do we renovate that? As we transition from schematic to design development becomes, okay, what's the building gonna look like? What are the floors gonna start, what finishes are you gonna use? What will be your technology scope, which would be some of those pieces. And as we start identifying those pieces, we'll start assigning numbers in more detail for each of them.
And so as a reminder to the board and the public, the next steps really are the board just approving the next phase of design development. So the board will continue to have an opportunity to say, no, we don't want to move forward, or the cost has gone up too much, we need to make adjustments to the design. And again, that's part of the process of bringing this back to you multiple times, is to get your input and guidance on continuing to move forward with the process.
Wait, on the slides that were shown last month, there was a note of what the capacity of Henderson was and then what our current enrollment was. How do you determine the capacity of a school?
There are a couple of different ways. The black and white way is per the code book, which if you take a 900 square foot classroom, it's 20 square foot per student or per person, which means there's going to be 45 people in there. I put in 45 people in a classroom. Okay, so we use that for egress purposes, because that would be an absolute worst case if all of us are, in 15 years aren't here and the administration then decides, yeah, we're going to put 45 people in there. We've designed it for that. Then you have a design capacity, which we get from the school district. What is your, the first question out of our mouths is, what is your maximum class size? Is it 25? Is it 30? Or do you have one teacher? Do you have two teachers? And then whatever your answer is, we will usually add 5% to that and use that as our design capacity. So if you tell me, okay, the maximum students we're going to put in a classroom is 25 with one teacher. Okay, that's 26. I will typically use 28 to 30 for that classroom's capacity from an HVAC standpoint, from a storm shelter standpoint, and then you can use that in relation to your enrollment or your enrollment will drive that number, saying, well, we don't have enough room, we need to go up to 28 students a class. So it's not a clean answer, but that's the best answer I've got.
Yeah, that's fine. It rarely is with those type of things, I understand, but that's helpful. So what I think I heard you said there towards the end was we're not necessarily adding capacity, we're adding more rooms for art and other things like that.
We're taking standard classrooms out of the existing building, giving them the classroom wing, which standard classrooms are the cheapest and easiest to build, rather than building art classrooms and building music classrooms in the new wing. I'd rather build just standard classrooms and then come in and use the existing spaces for art and music and that type of thing.
That is a great question, Vice President Cook, that, there are currently 32 general education classrooms, you would say, in this design. There are still 32, so 35 per grade level currently with 2 spare classrooms. When we look at the enrollment projections that we talked about with the demography study last year, their lowest decrease, they had put it at 1%, which they anticipated Henderson being at 664 this year. As of Monday, they're at 665. And so even if those projections were to play out, it would only be about 50 down from that in the next 5 years. And so the need here isn't additional classrooms to add classrooms and lower class size. It really is about reallocating the space to provide some of those other support classrooms with appropriate learning spaces within them.
So when I was at Henderson this past Monday, it looked like the art room had moved into what was the original art room that has sinks and whatnot. And I believe that was not where the current art rooms are shown. Do you know what I'm getting at is if you're building 2 new art rooms here in yellow, wouldn't you make the second one next to the existing art room that already has plumbing and sinks?
I wasn't aware that they had moved back into that. When these plans were put together, they were still in the center, I believe.
Oh, sure. I think that was just this year they moved for the first time.
But to answer that, we are, I will say, as we get further into design development, our office and our team will go through that building with a fine-tooth comb and identify those type of pieces and say, oh, there's an art classroom here, can we make that? Can we expand off of that for a second art classroom? So, these plans aren't set. We do need to go into that building, and really go through with a fine-tooth comb and identify all of those spaces, what they're being used for. We know a lot of them, but I'm not going to pretend to know everyone.
One of the other concerns we heard was that there was a lack of restrooms. Do I see some new restrooms in here? Just on the addition in the upper left. Is there any, I guess, another consideration as you do the walkthrough?
It would be, and what we'll do as part of the design development is I'll run a full plumbing calc based on the current codes. And given my experience with buildings, the school buildings of this size in elementary schools, with the added student toilets and the new classroom wing, I think you can do okay. The question will be ADA accessibility, because I know right now there are no ADA accessible faculty toilets. There are no accessible SPED toilets. Those are going to be 2 key pieces. So we'll do a full plumbing calc and identify that and share that with the team, because I will say usually the plumbing code covers properly, but every building is a little different from how much or how many they need from a usage standpoint.
This may go, I don't know who this would be directed at, but when we approved the computer science curricula earlier this year, we had some talks about how those specials would be integrated into each elementary school. And if I remember, Henderson had that, has already started. They're one of the few that started this year. But it was my understanding that computer science would there would be an impact to the other specials, be it art or music. And so I'm wondering, as I see 2 music rooms, 2 art rooms, Are those, is that still, that capacity in art and music still needed as we add computer science? Might not have an answer tonight, but it's something to think about over the next. And making a music classroom, I'm guessing, is the same as a regular class. I'm really more thinking of art, which sinks and plumbing and all of that. My concern there. We need it if we're going to keep two sections of art at the same time. That's fine. I just wanted to bring that up in case it hadn't been thought about. It looks like the library was an addition there recently since the original construction.
Yes.
Did this building originally have a library? Do you recall from seeing the original plans? It did?
Yes, I don't remember where it was.
Right in the middle, maybe next to the cafeteria or something.
At the very part of the building with a classroom and
Was it in that space behind the stage, where the steps went up? Okay.
so down.
The ELL classroom, the classrooms we saw were small. I'm not sure if that's something that is normally a small group instruction, or is it preferable to have a larger class, but we just don't have the space?
Depends on the needs of the students. But
In talking with Dr. Borman, they have 4 instructors where kind of in a couple different spaces. The preference was to get them into one space, one larger space that could be subdivided using demountable partitions or partial height walls so that they could all be in a group. So it is a smaller group instruction, but it's multiple instructors that they want to have in the same space.
Okay.
I have one comment, I guess. One of the other issues that was brought up that I think has been resolved was the amount of storage. They have chairs and just being a school, they have stuff. I'd like some, I guess, reassurance from Dr. Borman and her team that the storage areas that we have right there, adjacent somewhat to the cafeteria, that's adequate for their needs moving forward. If not, then I would suggest either building onto the gymnasium to cover that inside area there, and or putting I know this is a bad word, putting a trailer on the grounds so that they would at least have, some place to put the things that they're not used every day.
It's all added. I think as we begin to work through this process and board's blessing, start looking at fine detailing some things and going through quality control, there's certainly an opportunity if we end up going the direction of adding a gym to obviously that naturally makes sense to store all of those extra chairs.
Mm-hmm.
That's not only a instructional space during the day, but as we also look at what that program, what the needs are after, the normal school day, additional chairs for certain events. We'll certainly incorporate that and bring that back to the board for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things I will say to that, you're going to free up some storage space by moving some of the special ed and other programs out. I'm not going to say it's enough because I don't live there, but we can definitely look at some additional storage space in or around the gym and address that need and make sure it's taken care of either as part of this or planned, outside or a future piece.
As long as we're doing it, we might as well do it right the first time.
Agreed.
I'll just tack onto that. I did see a lot of sped classes or what have you in very small spaces, and one of my concerns, I might have mentioned it to you, Jane, was that I guess it just would like some reassurance that when we're done here that won't be the case anymore, because the last thing we want is, we should have added those other 400 square feet while we were there,
Right.
I will agree with that. The one asterisk that I'll say is kind of that 15 years down the road when you have new administrators and they start plugging people into these spaces again. I don't have control over that. My goal is right now is to get those programs and those offices out of those spaces and give them their own homes.
Yep, and what I've also had is just looking at the current data in terms of the student population that we serve there currently. We believe by the time we're through with this and bring a recommendation back, that we'll be able to right size, but also create an opportunity for future expansion should that need, that student population that we serve grow, we'll have an opportunity to increase that.
Any other questions on the floor plan piece of Henderson?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna kind of piggyback onto what Chad was saying. This is, if you can make the expansion, the storm shelter, and you possibly keep the gym where it is, you have extension, some expansion considered there. Why not, is it feasible just make those music rooms right now? Make one storm shelter, combine classrooms with music as part of it, and you can keep the gym where it is. Is that feasible?
Anything's feasible. I'm not sure if that existing gym, multipurpose room, has a full-size court on it. And that was something that was mentioned. And I don't believe the existing gym can house 2 PE classes at one time. They do have those.
The other factor that we've considered is that the cafeteria, or the kitchen, excuse me, not cafeteria, is attached to the gym. And so it's not uncommon that during PE class, students have to walk in there while things are being thrown, kids are running around, walk in, get their food, come back out into the gym where PE is taking place, carrying their food down the hallway. So part of it's separating those two spaces so we don't have that interaction also.
Ron, you got my brain turning here as you mentioned that, but something to consider as we're pontificating. But we have these 2 future additions up in the area that we're talking about, the additional classroom space. But I guess maybe consider just making those the music rooms, or put those 2 classrooms in and take the multi-purpose room and add on to that.
2 classrooms and making them music.
Right, and then where you have the storm shelter down to the lower right, eliminate that.
Eliminate this.
Well, make the storm shelter the classrooms, obviously. But then the multi-purpose room down where you have the music there,
Yeah.
I wonder if you can expand that and make a gym out of it. And then you eliminate basically that large gym there.
I don't know, expanding that building will be very, very difficult because it's already long span structure. You would have to come in with some type of very, very large beam. I would not recommend doing that over building a separate gym. You'd basically be better off to tear it down and build it in the same location. And that building is mid-90s, if I remember correctly, that piece. The structural and seismic codes have changed tremendously in that time span. And anytime you touch a structure, you have to bring it up to current seismic code. That would not be an easy task to expand that existing multipurpose room. Now, to your point or your comment regarding making the music classrooms, putting the music classrooms up here and maybe expanding this classroom wing, that is feasible, and then you maintain the multipurpose room as a multipurpose room. There's more dollars involved in, you're probably adding 2,000 square feet times $350 a square foot. But when are you going to come and add those 2 classrooms down the road? I'm all for building more, building now, doing it right, but You tell me, building those 2 classrooms, you would get good bang for your buck at the end of that classroom lane, and then keeping the multipurpose room. So I'm not gonna say that's a bad idea at all. It comes down to, are you willing to spend those extra dollars?
It would be tough for me because we have enrollment projections declining, but we're now limited to 15 years. That's it. Especially maybe for, once we have some better costs on it.
Yeah, and I will offer this, and I don't like offering it all the time because it ends up being more work for me. You could easily bid those 2 classrooms as a bid alternate. If the cost estimates bear it out that, hey, that's not a bad value, we could bid as an alternate, then you see the true cost and you can say yes or no.
There's also the reality, if you've ever been by 3rd graders and recorders, to not have those at the end of an academic hallway with special education classrooms in 5th grade, to have those separate on the other side of the building. As a former music person, it's not necessarily a bad idea.
So what I'll do now is I'll walk through the site development for Henderson, answer some questions on that, and then hopefully we'll bring Henderson to a close for now and move on to Fairmont. On the site development, this is kind of a trickle-down site design, meaning one thing leads to another. First things first, we would relocate or build a new soft surface playground, which would bring all the playgrounds together. We would put in an expanded hard surface play area because we're going to take some of that up for parking, and I'll get back to that in a second. Then coming around to where the gym is, that is right where the current utilities come in, so we're going to run into some headaches with the service area for the kitchen, utility entrances. So we push the gymnasium out a little bit, which shifts the bus drive, which eliminates a row of parking, which then we make up for that row of parking, and then we come back to the back of the building where we add a dedicated staff parking lot. All in all, the way it's laid out now, and it can be tweaked quite a bit one way or the other, we would be going from about 128 spaces, 130 spaces, and up to about 160 spaces as part of the site design. And again, we're still very early in the process and working through things, so please provide your thoughts and comments. One of the things that we looked at also was making sure the traffic flow doesn't change or get affected significantly. So the traffic into the site, the bus traffic, is going to be much the same as it was previously, where they come in the right-hand lane, come in front of the building, park, load. We do have sufficient space for up to 16 or 17 buses, and I think they're currently at 12. Then auto loop would come on the left-hand drive coming in, come through the parking lot, which would provide stacking area. I have not done a calculation or a drawing showing how much stacking. I know the easy answer is it's never enough. So we will do that as we move into design development. But in summary, the parking area, or I'm sorry, the traffic flow of the site won't change significantly from the way it is now. That's the site on Henderson. Any questions or concerns or comments? And again, we've talked very briefly with Jen Simpson, Director of Transportation, and she will be heavily involved, as she has been on previous projects, making sure that these things jive with what she wants in the safest possible way to address each site.
then I believe this information was part of the information shared at the last meeting. These are our current estimates based on the drawings that we've shown. Additions and renovations architecturally would be in the neighborhood of $8.8, $8.9 million. HVAC upgrades, a little under $5 million. We have included a contingency of 10% for unforeseen conditions and design scope changes. I will say, as we narrow down our scope and really identify, okay, we're gonna do this piece and this piece and this piece. Once we get, we have boring information on the site. Once we start looking at that in more detail, saying, okay, no rock, okay, soft soils, that 10% number, we'll start whittling that down to 7 and 6 and 5%, because the more we know going into the project, the more accurate our estimates and bids can be. And then FF&E projected soft costs. The soft costs include design fees for engineering, survey costs, geotech costs, special testing for materials. The one thing very good about Henderson, and this will help reduce that soft cost number, our geotechnical borings and our survey work are already done. Thanks for that. So I've not taken that number off of that yet, but that soft cost number will come down because we already have that work done. So all told, 16 to 17 million for the Henderson project as presented. It's in that $350 to $380 a square foot number when you put all the site work in it. I wish I had better numbers than that square foot number, but we've bid a lot of jobs in the last 3 years, and they haven't proven me wrong, and I wish they would.
So wait, to clarify, that number does include the site renovations on the prior slide with the parking lot, the playground movement, that's included there as well.
The playground equipment and surfacing would be separately by owner. That is, we'll provide the grading and any drainage in the site package, but the actual surfacing and equipment would be by the school district. You'll get better pricing for it that way. You don't need to pay me to pay somebody else to design it.
Do you have any experience with what that cost, what ballpark that cost might be?
The playgrounds?
Yeah.
250 to 300.
Yeah, and that's a rough number, 250 to 300. But much of that is going to be driven by the type of equipment that we put on there, and obviously ADA considerations, the types of swings that might swing that price one way or another. But in general, you should be looking at about 250 to 300.
And then finally, the last piece on Henderson is our schedule. We're in that initial review process right now. I would anticipate a project like this moving forward with design, development, and construction documents being about 6 months, which would put us at authorizing bid documents in March, bidding, permit approval, receiving bids and award in March and April, with construction starting day one of summer 2024, putting us roughly at winter of 25-26 as a move-in day, a mid-year move-in. A couple of notes, you see estimated asterisks here. Those are pieces I don't have control over. Permit review is going to be the authorities that have jurisdiction. Fortunately, City of St. Peters and Central County Fire are usually pretty good about quick reviews, but I never know. People change, staffs change, requirements change. And then the actual construction, I'm allowing 16, 17 months, which should be a good period to get that done in. Should be less, but I can't predict what contractor and what teams they'll have. So, that's why I've put asterisks on those. I can control the other pieces, the design, development, construction documents,
bidding, I can control those pieces. I can't control the other pieces of permit review to actual construction. So that's what I have on Henderson. And welcome any and all questions.
Wade, given the phasing, which is, looks complicated, given that we're not moving the building while this happens, is there any wiggle room when we think about this timeline of starting June 24? If we're not able to start then, does this delay until the following June?
I don't believe so. You're going to have a lot of summer work. I will ask, and I will strongly recommend allowing us to move ahead now rather than coming back in a month or 2 months. You may miss that window of starting this summer and getting done in winter of '25, which would then push it to spring break or potentially summer of '26. There's going to be, at Henderson, there's going to be a significant amount of interior renovation that has to be done after the classrooms are closer to done, because obviously you're using a lot of the existing spaces where we're moving other things to. For instance, the art classrooms, if we end up moving them, those are being used by 3 other classes now. We need classroom wing done and come back and renovate those art rooms or whatever they are that are now moved out. So I've taken a very quick first blush look at phasing. That's something that we'll look at in a lot of detail with Saloon, with Lisa, with the board, and we'll put in the construction documents. Hey, this is a working campus. You can't touch these spaces until X date. And we will analyze that very closely because you're right. It's a working campus. It's a working building. Safety is paramount. So we'll look at it in more detail, but the more time that you give yourselves by moving ahead now gives you a better feel at the back end and not having to move in over a spring break, over a weekend, or worse even, having unused building areas until the summer of 2026. So the sooner we can get going, the better. And from a office standpoint, we're ready to go. I got people ready to go. Not that they don't have anything to do, but I got people ready to go and take this head on. Especially once I get the security vestibules done. So.
Just to add to that, Dr. Rumpus said that the biggest challenge is we look at sequencing and phasing mechanical systems. That will require touching every single space and very invasive in the classroom pieces as we run potentially ductwork, as we eliminate those package thermal systems that we currently have. So that is work that obviously would have to take place potentially over a couple of summers.
Any additional questions on Henderson?
One more going back to the floor plan, and you may have mentioned it, I missed it, but on the nurse's office, if I recall, Jane, they don't have a shower in there?
Don't believe so.
That's correct.
I don't have one shown, but that's not uncommon to put one in to add that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's desired, but certainly by the administration. And then,
I think also a washer and dryer she was talking about.
I think they had one, maybe they need more. They're okay there.
Yeah, you're okay.
And then I see, are you doing a renovation or moving the lactation room to have a sink and everything? Is that going to be part of your?
Yes. There's a small special education, or might have been a reading room currently, that's kind of between the nurse's office and the adjacent sped room that we're gonna, it's a decent size, 350 square foot. We're gonna split that in half, give half of it to the nurse's office to add on to their space, kind of give them a sick bay area, and then take the other half and make it a dedicated lactation room, that has plenty of space and a sink set up.
I'm not sure a sick bay and a lactation room should be all that close. It's just
There'll be a wall between it.
Okay.
There'll be a wall between it. Correct. And they won't open onto each other. It'll be, okay.
Let's see where we go.
Let's go to Fairmont. Just to, again, give you a lay of the land. Main entrance as shown, with the administration suite just inside of that. How do you pronounce that? From someone who's not from the district?
When we say Fairmount, oh, you're talking about the road?
The road.
Oh, I'm thinking Fairmount.
Totally.
Totally?
Totally.
Okay. I'll probably pronounce it about 5 times wrong in different ways, so I apologize. But that's out in front of the building. Here, again, first thing we're gonna do is put in the secure vestibules this summer. We're working on that right now. One piece that I want to note as part of the overall planning for this building is where right now, we're expanding the administration suite to get it all together. Right in this corner currently, they have a special ed toilet, laundry, shower. We're gonna pull that out and put it here, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. But that will be incorporated now as part of the security vestibule package. New construction, we are looking at a classroom wing storm shelter on the south side of the building that will house 4 standard size classrooms, actually 3 music classrooms, and an art classroom. Pardon me, a lot of this has changed in the last few hours. So we will also come in with a couple special education rooms, a dedicated ELL room, and a home for vacation station. And what we've done, we've talked with Sherry quite diligently and quite often about what goes where. And again, this is a effort to get spaces out of poor learning environment spaces and create better learning environments for the programs that we're shifting. So this wing, the dark blue, is about 12,000 square feet. The big rectangle of that area would be the storm shelter, and then you'd have a connecting link between the two, between the new and existing building. For renovation work, the primary focus that we kind of looked at is expanding the cafeteria to provide additional seating and better flow in and out. And to that end, we will incorporate a couple additional doors. We're going to take an existing classroom, 2 existing classrooms, and create additional space. And then both of those classrooms that are taken out move to the new classroom wing, their special education classrooms. And then previously I showed you the toilet, shower, laundry relocated, changing room. Well, now we're going to take this space, which I believe was the original library for the building and is an open concept with walls that don't go to the ceiling, that are open to other spaces. We're going to reconfigure that and move 4 special education rooms that are in this wing that all need access to that changing room and toilet. We're going to put them in that space and build those as actual rooms. Right now there is a Spectra classroom. Right now there is a Spectra classroom and 2 music classrooms, which will move, the 2 music classrooms will move into the new building. Spectra will move to the special ed classrooms that are here. We will have a dedicated space for the literacy coaches that are currently in trailers. And then you can see we'll take one of these classrooms and punch a corridor through and pick up additional reading specialist rooms. And you can see it on this plan. We're going to pick up quite a few reading specialist rooms that are in closets throughout this building. They are also in the library building, which I do not have shown on here, and I apologize. They're in some spaces remotely in the reading area or in the library area. We're going to move those down into the main building. And then there are a couple of special education offices that need to come down from the upper level and closets down to this space. Site-wise, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the site because it is, the building itself, the renovations are a little simpler. Again, you can see the site here with the main entrance and Toley Road. This is one that we have talked quite a bit with Jen Simpson about, as well as Sherry. You can see the building on the south side. There's currently a parking lot right here. We would move that parking lot to the south side of the new addition. The intent is to expand the parking here for staff and visitors, as well as some of the traffic flow, and I'll get that to that in a minute. We would relocate and consolidate the two grades 1 through 5 playgrounds, which would be here. And the goal of all of this is to improve the traffic flow on this site, and we do that by reversing the traffic flow between auto and bus. Right now, the buses come to the front of the building, the auto traffic goes to the back. In talking with Jen Simpson, we'd like to move the bus routes to the back lot and have them route in and out as shown. And then we would take advantage of this parking lot and have the auto traffic come in and stack and loop and then go in front of the building. We think this is going to accomplish a few things, and one of which is getting some of the traffic off of the roadway, which is highly advisable, obviously, as well as providing about 70 extra spaces for this site. And some of the discussion today with Sherry was using the north and south lots for staff and leave the front lot entirely open to visitors and parents, thus reducing some of the traffic directly in front of the building at the same time.
And if I could add, one of the most significant complaints that we received from this site, excuse me, is all of our, not only bus traffic, but also, more importantly, our car traffic backs up into a lot of the neighborhoods. So by comprehensively approaching, this site, not only from an instructional needs standpoint, but also from a just operational safety standpoint, this plan would remove all of those vehicles that are backed up into the neighborhoods during arrival and dismissal.
Any questions about the floor plan or site plans on Paramount? Be glad to answer them.
So you didn't have the library shown, but you mentioned some things in there. Are you considering wiping out all of the spaces that were created in there, or just emptying them out?
No, just moving instructors. As far as what those spaces become, I believe they are going to become more tech-focused. And if I remember correctly, they were going to use 2 of the spaces for computer sciences. If I remember correctly, because I believe they have or have those coming. Yeah, I believe we had 1 computer science shown in the new wing, and I believe 2 of the spaces in the existing library building were going to go to the computer science program.
Wait, I do wonder, I know I made a joke about it at Henderson, but having those 2 sped classrooms in yellow right next to those music classrooms in that new wing, I wonder if there's a different way to do some configuration that might keep all the specials
Most
together.
likely,
Avoid that.
definitely.
And this is the concept that Chad's brilliant, that we were talking about at over at Henderson. Can we not consider that combining the storm shelter with the classrooms and that possibly save them some money?
That would be my intent here, is the classroom wing here.
Right, but using this concept, use it at Henderson, could that not possibly save us some money on the Henderson side?
Yes. I don't think it'll be significant monies, but I think it will save you some money to do, because the intent, if you do, we've done several of these now. I think we're in the 20s now as far as storm shelters. Once you get over 18-foot tall walls, you can't do masonry because of the reinforcing requirements, and then it basically pushes you to precast concrete. Depending on whose opinion you believe, precast is more expensive than masonry. Masonry is slower than precast. Either way is fine with me. I think the easier construction is masonry, even though it's a lot of rebar, but masonry, a lot of people do masonry. Not a lot of people do precast concrete. So if all the precasters are very, very busy, you're waiting on them. You could have a site ready to go, footings, foundations poured, and have to wait 2 months for precast panels. All the while, you could have been putting up masonry. So if you ask me, I love to do masonry, but there's that 18-foot threshold where, if you go above it, masonry doesn't work from a reinforcing standpoint to 250 mile-an-hour winds. That's what you have to stand up to for a tornado shelter. But 18 foot works for classrooms. Okay, so if you put a storm shelter as classrooms, you can do masonry, which in my opinion is a little easier. But if you need a larger space, like a gym or an auditorium at Francis Isle North, that's going to be precast. So I like the idea of doing masonry around the classroom wing at Henderson as well. I do need to crunch the numbers as far as making sure that wing houses enough students and staff. I believe it will. I've made a mistake of saying, oh yeah, sure it will before. I want to run the numbers to make sure.
As you do your detailed walk with Dr. Oliver for Fairmount, so I'll just point out there's some areas in the front corner where I saw some daylight between the windows, so I don't know if it's a structural engineering thing or what, but make a note to have her show you that.
Okay. Now, the one thing that I didn't have, and pardon me, Salim, I've not asked, is we don't have any HVAC work allocated to that building right now, to the existing building.
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
We are, as part of the full bond program, obviously deferred maintenance is a big piece of that. And we're currently working to just look at all of our systems in terms of life cycle, where they're currently at, how long they've been in service, number of service calls we've received on those, for the purpose of really bringing back a data-driven recommendation on what to address. And so as we work through that, we'll bring the recommendation back for deferred maintenance at some point. But respective to the scope of work we're talking about right now, these systems are not part of that.
One thing I did mention in the first site drawing, there are 2 modular buildings right now. Obviously, if we do this addition, those go away. And that makes this bus loop and additional parking better on the backside, and gets those out. Estimates, right now, again, this was presented last time at the last meeting. We have just under $5 million associated with additions and renovations, as I mentioned. No HVAC upgrades at the time being. project contingency, FF&E, and soft costs are all the same percentages, 10, 1, and 10. Again, as we get further into the drawings and know what we're doing, where we're doing, we'll be able to bring that down. So overall, the estimate for Fairmont, I would put at just under 6 million, probably more accurately right at 6, as it stands right now. This schedule is much the same as the Henderson one. The one difference that I have kind of allowed myself is 8 months for design development and construction documents, just because a lot of the information that we've gotten on Fairmont is a little more recent, and we've not had time to flesh it out. For instance, the special ed rooms that are next to the music. You know, a lot of things were flying around, and that's where those ended up, so we need to flesh out some of those items. I'd like a little more time to go through that building in further detail. May not need 2 months, extra, but I need a little bit extra on that one. Bottom line is, if we have authorization tonight on both of them, I believe you can get in both of them winter break of 25-26. That would be the goal. Again, same asterisks apply here with permit review and the actual construction timeline. Any other questions on Fairmont? Any concerns? Any pieces that I haven't picked up upon?
I'd like to thank you for coming in and this comprehensive presentation on all the potential that there is here. We'd like to ask the board for a motion to move forward with the design development stage for Fairmont and Henderson.
So, second.
Stiglich, Mayor Pushkar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it.
We're October 11th now. I would hope to have an updated presentation for the November board meeting, I believe 17th. So I will shoot for that, and then I'll get with Dr. Rumpus and Carol and Saloon to make sure that's right, and then we'll get moving on these. 16th, I was close. Again, thank you for your time. If, it always happens to me 5 minutes after a meeting or a phone call, I think of another question or a comment. Please share as needed. We're here to help. We want to make sure that the rest of the Prop S projects and any future projects are successful, thoroughly thought out, and we maintain open lines of communication throughout. So if you do have any questions or comments that come up after the meeting, please share them, route them to me, through Ken or Saloom or Carol. I'll do my best to get answers back to you on a timely basis. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Dr. Oliver and Dr. Borman for giving us a great tour of their 2 buildings. It really helped a lot in trying to make some decisions, so I appreciate it.
They've been very helpful in putting together some of these drawings. And as a son of 2 educators, I know what it's like to live in those buildings. So I pretend to be, fairly knowledgeable, but I'm not the one that has to live there how many days a year. Principal's 364. Thank you, good Christmas. Thank you again for your time.
We're going to take a quick 5-minute break. We'll come right back.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started back up again. Up next on the agenda is a discussion on FERPA and directory information, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Rappus.
Thank you, President Bertrand. I also want to welcome Dr. Holly Broadway Yates, our Director of Student Services, is with us here tonight. She and Ms. Jules have both spent a lot of time working on this, supporting our team as we work through this and get some guidance, and so they'll both be chiming in tonight as we talk. As we shared at last month's regular business meeting, we've been exploring options regarding the directory information and the concerns that were raised about that being provided. Currently, you're aware that when it comes to directory information, we offer one option, and that is either that it exists or that you can fully opt out. And that's a concern that we have heard from many of our parents, that they would like to have additional options. The reality is as we've explored that on our end, we have to think about our ability to honor those parent requests. And so while we do have the ability to allow parents to opt out, allowing it to be a pick and choose menu of 10 or 12 different items would be near impossible for us with the student enrollment we have to be able to do that and honor the parent requests and not be making mistakes. And so what we want to talk through tonight, one option that we would like the board to consider and to get your feedback on is looking at an additional limited opt-out option that we would have. And so on the form that you look at, within the limited opt-out, well, we would continue to have the full opt-out that exists right now. And what's important for parents to understand when they choose the full opt-out for their student is that excludes them from anything that would involve directory information. So when we think about yearbooks or other school publications where their photos might be published or included, honors and awards where they might be included in a program or be photographed or that might be publicized or communicated out, websites, social media, sports and activity programs, even to students participating in certain sports. You might hear height and weight. We had that concern. Why is that considered directory information? We don't maintain that for all students, but it would be for, I think, specifically about wrestling and some other sports where you might want to put a student's weight, or in multiple sports you might include a student's height. That's why that's included. So when you do a full opt-out, your student is not included in any of those. So it is a very restrictive option. And like I said, we recognize that right now that's our only option that we had. And so what we're recommending tonight is this idea of a limited opt-out. What that would do is it would allow information to be shared specifically with school-affiliated third parties. How we would describe that is when we think about groups that we work with, so a yearbook company, a photo company, a scholarship company that we might have an MOU with or we've engaged in an agreement to participate with. There are school-related companies and organizations. PTO would be another example, and some of those supports that we have, booster programs that specifically support our programs. The information could be shared there. What would be excluded in this piece would be outside third parties that do not have a direct correlation to the district. That could include advocacy groups, political action groups. For the purposes of this, we include employee or labor organizations or individual members of the public that don't have a specific school-related purpose. We also have companies that reach out sometimes wanting that directory information for sales or marketing purposes, and if parents have not opted out of that, it could be provided. So those would all be included here. Again, parents would have the option of fully opting out, which means none of it is shared ever and excludes their student, or this limited opt-out where to these specific school-affiliated organizations, the directory information could be provided. And then parents would still have the option of not doing either of those, which means their students' directory information could be provided to anybody who would request it through a sunshine request. You'll see on here we also have the military opt-out, which is a piece that we have always had that is related to federal law, but that's where a parent can say, I don't want my child's directory information shared with military recruiters. That's still in here. And then the last section that we are recommending adding is a media-specific opt-out. So if a parent were to do a full opt-out, media would be included. We wouldn't be putting photos or any information on our district or school websites or social media channels. But we recognize there might be a situation where a parent may want the directory information provided to the yearbook for their kid to participate or to be in programs, but they may not want their child's photo to be put on, again, our social media site, our websites. And so parents would have that option as well as another opt-out that they could do. If the board indicates being comfortable with us moving forward with these options. We would also then want to bring forward a policy and regulation revisions. 2400 is our policy and regulation that relates specifically to student education records. And you'll see in here, the changes really are just to mirror that we would now offer these opt-outs and to make sure that that's aligned between the policy and the regulation. And we would want to bring those forward as soon as possible. Tonight could be considered a first read, and we would bring it back to the board at the regular scheduled meeting to approve it. And then what we would need to do is work through a timeline. If changing and moving toward these other opt-out options, we have a responsibility and we want to re-communicate these new options to our parents, provide them the information, give them an opportunity to ask questions that we would answer, and then allow them time to respond, submitting the form back to us so that we could then make the changes in our system with the parents' request. So we would establish, a 2-week window or whatever that might be to ask parents to respond. And we would do that as soon as possible, given the current frustration around our opt-out communication and the different options that we have. Moving forward, what would happen is each year when a parent re-registers for the year, if you've already completed this, it would stay in the system. We wouldn't stop it unless the parent notified us we want to change our opt-out option. But then each year during the registration process, parents would be reminded of the FERPA laws, be reminded of directory information and their ability to opt out. And then there would be a deadline built in, likely like September 1st each year, which would give parents a couple of weeks into the school year to make that declaration if they want to and for us to update the system. So we'd be happy to talk in a little bit more detail about it or answer questions that you might have. We heard from several parents, like I said, who are sending emails or writing their own letters indicating, well, I don't want to opt out fully, but I want my kid to be included in this, this, and this. And as I shared, it's just not realistic for us to be able to look at 10 or 12 different factors and allow 17,000 students to have individual choices like that. So we feel like this gives parents several options that would address a lot of the concerns that we have heard over the last several weeks.
Dr. Rompus, I do have a question. I know that in the past we've had a lot of sunshine requests, etc., and everything. This is going to be a lot of work for our administration, for somebody in administration. I know it already is. Our administration and admin assistants are already pretty spread pretty thin. Are we looking at, if this is the way we decide to go with this opt-in, opt-out policy, hiring and needing more staff to help with some of the processes so that mistakes aren't made or whatever? I mean, are we going to need more help in order for us to do this the right way?
I appreciate the question because we recognize the concern and the frustration for some of our families that this has caused, and we recognize that we have one opportunity to do this the right way moving forward. And we don't want to cause additional frustration because we offer these options and that we can't fulfill our obligation to honor what the parents choose. Do I think that we need to hire additional staff in order to implement this? I don't. There will be an initial workload in the sense that as these forms come back in, our building information specialists who generally do a lot of the registration stuff will have to go through the process, make sure that we get in, that it's put in accurately, and then it'll really be a lot of a focus on training. So making sure that the people inputting the information understand how to do it accurately so it's coded correctly in the system, and then working with our building administrators, with our teachers, district administrators, coaches, others, to understand then that, in our practice moving forward, when we get requests for information or we're posting information, that we need to be monitoring those lists. So we would know building by building, for example, if Jen Jules and her team come in to cover an event, we would ask, who are the students that are excluded? And we currently do that now, but it's been such a small number across the district that it's pretty easy to know who those students are to make sure that we're not posting photos of them or including information. I would expect with these options, we'll have more families taking advantage of that than have previously. And so it's just a matter of helping staff understand that, training, and then continue to provide ongoing training and reminders that we're upholding whatever we've committed to doing. We, like I said, when we look at directory information and it's 10 or so bits of information that are included in there, if we were to allow a pick and choose of all of those, that it would be unmanageable. We couldn't do it, but we do believe with offering either the full opt-out or limited, and then having the media piece, that it is reasonable. It is in line with what some of our neighboring districts and other districts we researched are doing. And so we do feel that it'll be something we can uphold.
I would ask that if in the event that we do decide to go this way, that you would monitor that and let us know if you think we need additional help to help with that, because I'm just really worried that we're going to be putting extra burden on people that are already kind of maxed out. So if we could please make sure that we monitor that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, board?
Regarding the definition of directory information that we as a district can define, there are certain things in here that are needed in order to publish yearbooks and do routine things. The things I'm seeing that aren't necessary for that are address, telephone number of the parents, email address of the parents. So is there a reason we need to leave those defined as directory information, or can we strike those without a significant impact to the day-to-day operations of the work we do?
So the board has the ability, under the guidance from the Department of Education at the federal level, to designate which pieces of what they consider to be directory information an individual district would choose to include or not. Could we continue to operate if we don't include those? Absolutely. It's some of those pieces that would change either our operations or the level of work and responsibility. So for example, when we talk about email address, those of you that are currently parents that have been getting the recent emails that your student's photo is taken, here we've sent you a link to the photo if you would like to order it. Another example would be when the photos come in, how they're distributed. When we think about some of our partnerships with, for example, organizations that support our seniors, that you might receive mailings around class rings, graduation announcements, and those pieces. If we don't provide address and we exclude that from directory information, it would just put the burden then on the company would provide, those 1,200 envelopes to the district, and the district would have a responsibility to mail those home or to distribute those to students in a different way. And so could it be done? It could. It's when we begin to look at removing some of those from directory that each one would just have a different impact. We surveyed our buildings to understand who they've been sharing this information with when it comes to even school affiliated, to understand some of those needs that we've had, to try and understand what the impact would be on them. I don't know that we're fully aware of every situation where it was at. That's why we came up with this opt-out option, understanding whether the board made a decision to actually change what we designate as directory information or not. We feel that these options would give parents the same ability to make those decisions with or without changing what's included within the directory information.
Other comments, board? Questions?
I just don't even know where to start. So if we include address and other information, and then somebody else outside requests it as part of directory, then we're good. But as far as the school rings, I mean, I get that, that might be an issue, but I really have a problem with student privacy. I mean, I just want to keep this stuff private. I get class rings, I get yearbooks, I get all of that stuff. But for me, it's just a really hard, a hard decision to get me to agree to put student address, grade, telephone number, all of that stuff. You mentioned, and I'll go back to the rings, I can't think of a better situation. But the thing is, I mean, it is on the vendor to make that information available to the student, not that the school should have to provide that information to them. If they want the business, they'll find a way to get the name and the address for the rings. I mean, the kids fill out a form when they go to purchase a ring. That's what we used to do. None of our information was ever disclosed. It's just a very, very hard decision. It's complicated in my mind because of the fact that there's so many things going on out there, predators, things like that want to follow kids, find out whatever they can about them to do harm. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Unfortunately, if it were up to me, I'd just say, name, maybe grade. That's it, you're done.
And again, the board has that ability to do so. It's just understanding, so with only name and grade, when we think about publishing a yearbook, we wouldn't post photos of a sports team. We wouldn't post photos of the drama play, because sports and activities are a piece of directory information. It would simply have a student, and again, we need, if photos not include either, if it's name and grade level, in the strictest understanding of that, it would be student names and grade levels all we would publish. And again, I think that the important piece to point out here is that it is giving parents the ability to make that decision for them and for their family. And so, it won't be perfect, but the guidance we've gotten checking with our legal is that, we do have the ability to identify who we identify as school-affiliated third parties, and that would allow us an opportunity to, and again, if a parent is comfortable with their students' directory information being provided to anyone that asks,
Well, sure.
they have that option, to not do any opt-out and allow that to happen.
I've just heard from a lot of parents that they weren't told that they could opt out.
Yeah, so
It wasn't clear. So I know we've got some work to do to make that more apparent to parents.
and I'm glad you mentioned that, Ms. Bushkar, because it is another piece that we're committed to moving forward. So one, you will see already on our website, we've updated, when you click the FERPA notice now is very clear on the homepage at the bottom. You can see it. It's already been updated to include clearly what is directory information. Here's a link to the opt-out form. All handbooks have already been double-checked, updated to make sure that information is there. And we recognize we have not only the opportunity, but a responsibility to be more clear in that communication to families. We received feedback from several parents that I thought was an excellent suggestion, that we need to somehow, there's a lot of legalese between FERPA at the federal level, Sunshine Law at the state level, that it's confusing to even read it the way we have to present it. So how can we be communicating this information clearly to our families? When we think about families that maybe speak different languages, are we in different ways communicating this out and really over communicating it so they really understand not only that it exists, but these are your options when it comes to the opting out. And so it is something we're committed to improving. And like I said, there will be an immediate communication piece, how we will re-communicate this now and any changes for the remainder of this year. And then what does that look like moving forward as part of the yearly notification process?
I know I support the changes, and I know one of the things I think about is like this is immediate steps we can take to kind of fill some of those gaps that we're hearing from parents. While I think we can also probably, as we move forward, go and say, really get that list together of what all the directory information is used for and why do we have it declared as directory information, so we can make an informed decision of do we want to change any of that in the future.
I think this limited opt-out is a good alternative. Is it perfect? Probably not, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Do you know, is somebody able to change, like, if they want to do it in the mid-year, or does it have to be done at the beginning of the year?
Under the law, if you want to put in a deadline, you have to provide to parents what that date is, when the deadline would be to do it. Otherwise, it's really open enrollment, for lack of a better term, ongoing changes. I think that we would try to work with the family and honor it if they wanted to make a change, but then we would have to be very clear in understanding the implications of that. If the yearbook is already being published and you were to decide at that point to opt out, it may be too late to remove your student from that without slowing down that whole, some of those things take months to prepare and to do, or it could be you decide you no longer want to be opted out at a certain level, but we're already far enough down the process, we're not going to be able to go back and include your student now. And so, again, we want to honor what the parents choose, and in order for us to do that in a district this size, it requires a lot of training and organization on the back end, and if we have hundreds of families on a monthly basis changing this, the potential for us to make a mistake becomes greater, and we want to avoid that. So my hope would be that we would communicate so much on the front end, parents understand what their options are and make that choice. And again, we would work with the family. I believe we would do our best to work with the family, but in order for us to honor that and fulfill our obligation to follow through on it, the less changes once the school year starts, the better.
Yeah, I think the limited availability is better than the all in or all out. Gives you a little bit more choice.
Agreed, total agree. For anything that is in a gray area not specifically mentioned in the opt-out, would that be brought before the board to find out, or would that be an administrative decision? Find out if they would be able to gain that information?
So the way this is written, it's less about what information would be shared, but about who that information would be shared with. So as we define what is a school-affiliated organization, I think as certain questions would come up, we would immediately want to check with legal to make sure that we're understanding what options are. And we can always, I think, as we move forward, there may be opportunities each year to refine this a little bit more or to make changes, and we could continue to update the board on that. One of the questions that we received was, could it be whenever we receive a request for information that we reach out to parents to let them decide if they want it released to that group or individual or not? Again, I come back to, we're at just about 16,500 students, and if we had to somehow communicate every time we receive a request for information to parents, get their feedback and their answers, and then hope that we would put kids on the right list or not when we're providing that information, we would not be able to sustain that or fulfill our obligation. And so that's why really leaning into these options, which we believe, it says including but not limited to. We're erring on the side of doing what we believe is tied to these options and that what would be included in the policy and regulation. It could always be that an outside organization might then appeal or want to claim that we didn't honor that, but we would err on looking at that. And I think if there's one that would come up as a question, then we'd have an opportunity to clarify moving forward.
If there is an affiliated third party that requests this information and we give it to them, whatever that information is there anything that stipulates to that third party that they have to hold this information as confidential?
There is not. So again, reminding people that this is driven by federal law. This is not Francis Howell. Yes, we have some policy options related to it. But it's the Department of Education that established what the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is, coming from federal law. And then they decided within the scope of a student's educational record, there are pieces of information that the U.S. Department of Education said, when provided, these would generally not be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy. Now, do I understand that we have many parents, some of you, who disagree with that interpretation, but that is the guidance. And so the initial list comes from the federal government of what can be included as directory information. This is not new. This has been in place for many years. I think the reality is just many people were not aware of it or didn't understand that it existed. So the reality is this information, and we've surveyed many of our neighboring districts here in St. Charles County, in the St. Louis area, regionally. Many districts, the same information we have on the list as directory, it's the same for them. Many do an all or nothing opt-out. So the reality is this information is being provided on a regular basis to many individuals and other parties outside of the school district because it is allowable under federal law. Doesn't mean we can't think about it differently. We can't change what we designate within the law as directory information and have the ability to do so. But to answer your question, Director Ponder, once somebody has it, it's considered not harmful for that information to be out. So we do not have any control once somebody has the information what they may choose to do with it.
Additional questions, comments, discussion? So my understanding is you're just looking for a direction from us of whether we support this kind of getting finalized for our next meeting. So I would maybe ask if there's any board members that don't support it, then we'll let you know this time. See if everybody supports this at least as the initial direction, and we can move forward with this for the next meeting. And then if there's initial steps we want to take, then we can look at those steps.
Yeah, so to clarify, we would like to move forward, where the timing is not ideal given that we have fall break next week, so many of our staff and families will not be in next week. We want to move forward as quickly as possible with making sure this form is finalized and being able to get that out to families. Just understanding we want to give them a couple of weeks to review it, to be able to get it back to us. The next step, though, is then the board voting on updating the policy and regulation, really just to be aligned with what's included here within the opt-out form, and that can come back to the board as soon as the next regularly scheduled meeting. We can post these documents following the meeting, so our patrons and parents can see what we're talking about with the changes on both the form and the policy and regulation. My only concern is, being very clear that this does say draft on it right now, and understanding that until it's emailed out to families, communicated, sent home possibly with our younger learners, that it's not finalized, but that this is what we're looking at right now.
And the one current request that we have, what would be the status of that in light of this?
So that is still currently an open status, and we've worked with them on a date for following up to provide that information. So we would have to work with them on that date, and if there's any flexibility, because not knowing where the board would feel tonight, and given that we do have fall break next week, it's a question of how quickly we can get this turned around and communicate it to our families.
Any other discussion, questions? Or like the motion to adjourn open session?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Harmon. Lang. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. Thank you, everybody.